Can everyone see the screen I have shared with you?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Good. Um, all right. So, since everybody is not going to be on the same page, we are going to spend the first 2 weeks on preliminaries. Now, that does not mean I'm hoping that even for those who have seen a good amount of graph theory before, there will be some new stuff in the first 2 weeks, right? So I just want to do a very quick check on how many of you have previously seen the term. How many of you are aware of these algebraic objects associated with a graph? Cycle spaces and cut spaces. They're also called bond spaces. Is there anybody who is familiar with cycle spaces and cut spaces or bond spaces? If so, you can type in the chat box or you can just turn on your mic and tell me. Okay, seems like nobody has seen that. So at least there'll be something new in the first week itself. Good. All right. So let's start with the basics. So today's lecture, we are going to basically have a lot of definitions. One of the complaints people typically have about graph theory is that there are too many definitions, which is true. They are not wrong about that. In defense, however, of graph theory, I would say that most definitions are suggested by the drawings. Okay, and that is going to be my approach. I'm not going to sit down and painfully write down all definitions rigorously using mathematical terminology that you all can do yourselves or you can look up in a book. I'm going to show you most of the definitions by drawings. Okay, so with that, let's start with graphs. What are graphs? Okay, so what I want to show you here is all graphs on 3 vertices. Okay, and I'm being slightly vague here. I should use the term all non-isomorphic graphs, but let's come to that later. Okay, so what's a graph? You have a graph G. There is an ordered pair. There is a set of vertices, which is generally denoted as V of G. I should put a cloth here. Give me a second. Okay. The vertices of the graph G and the edges of the graph G. Okay. So these are your vertices. So this is your first graph, G1, G2, G3, and G4. Okay. So if I have 3 vertices, well, I could have edges joining these vertices. So if I have 0 edges, then I get this graph, G1. If I have 1 edge, then I get this graph. Well, if I have 2 edges, then clearly the 2 edges will have to meet at a vertex. And this is when we say that the 2 edges are incident. So E1 and E2 are incident with each other. Okay. And the vertices are V1, V2, and V3. And the 2 edges, E1 and E2, they are both adjacent at the vertex V1, right? So E1 adjacent with V1 and also with V2. Okay, so that way we have covered a few definitions. And of course, the last possibility is that you have all 3 edges between the vertices V1, V2, and V3, right? And those are all the graphs on 3 vertices. Okay, of course, one point you might say, well, what about this graph? So I take V1, V2, and V3, and instead of making 2 edges incident at V1, I will make 2 edges incident at V2, and I will call this E1 and let's say I call this E3. Okay, so in some sense, these graphs look different, right? Here the edges are V1 and V2, and in the edges are V2 and V3, right? So the two edges are V1, V2, and V2, V3, right? Whereas here the two edges are V1, V2, and V1, V3, right? So you could say that G3 is different from G3 prime, right? Clearly, that doesn't matter. The labels of the vertices are not really relevant to us. And that brings us to the other definition, which is that two graphs are isomorphic. So G3 and G3 prime are isomorphic because you can just relabel the vertices, but the structure of the graph is actually the same, right? We will write down the formal definition of this later, but I'm hoping that everybody has seen this definition before. When are two graphs isomorphic and when they are not isomorphic? If you haven't, then please type it in the chat box so that I know that I should cover the formal definition. Okay, good. Let's see. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks. All right. So good. So we have this. I want to quickly go over all the graphs on four vertices. And when I say all graphs, I now mean all non-isomorphic graphs on four vertices, right? So I
Sir,
want, yeah, tell me.
sir, in G3 and G3 dash, there are some two edges.
Yeah.
But the edges are different. I think one edge is different. So,
Yes.
but isomorphic means that the same number of edges.
No, isomorphic means that, well, so if you want the formal definition, it basically means, okay, let me give you a more complicated example. Okay. Are you familiar with the Peterson graph?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this is the very famous Peterson graph. Okay. So actually, I don't care about the labels of the vertices and edges at all. Generally, I will not be labeling vertices and edges. I just care about the structure of the graph. Okay. So what I will do is, let me give you a different drawing of the Peterson graph. Let me make it this way. Let's see. Okay, so these two graphs, let me call them P1 and P2 for now. Actually, I won't use P. That's not a good choice. H1 and H2. Okay. Both of these are the same graphs because what you can do is you can find a mapping from the vertices of H1 to the vertices of H2. So there exists a mapping, there exists a bijection from the vertices of H1 to the vertices of H2 such that if two vertices are adjacent in H1, so the two vertices are adjacent if and only if their mappings, their images, phi of u and phi of v, are adjacent in the edges of H2. Okay, so this is the definition of an isomorphism. Okay, so what you can do is basically you can redraw the graph, you can label the vertices if you like, and then you can map them in such a way so that the edges are preserved exactly. It is not about the number of edges. To give you an example, here is another graph which has the same number of vertices and number of edges as this graph. You can check that both graphs have 10 vertices and 15 edges. But there is no way you would be able to map the vertices of H1 to H3 so that adjacencies are preserved exactly. Okay, So two vertices are adjacent in H1 if and only if their images are adjacent in H3. You will not be able to find such a mapping. Does that make sense, Biplab?
Yes, sir.
Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. So that's good. Of course, I use the same labels V1, V2, V3, but to make it clearer, you can call them V1 prime, V2 prime, V3 prime, and then find your mapping. Okay. So in this example that we were looking at, G3 and G3 prime, you can clearly find a bijection between the sets of vertices that will preserve adjacencies exactly. Okay. Good. Also, maybe I think I meant to use the term incident here. I'm sorry. An edge is incident with a vertex, and two vertices are adjacent. So in this example, Vi and Vj are adjacent for all I, j, where I and j are distinct. Okay. So we say that two vertices are adjacent if there is an edge joining them, and otherwise they are non-adjacent. And for an edge and a vertex, we use the term incidence. Okay. Now, if someone wanted to be extremely rigorous, then they would say that this is a drawing of a graph, because a drawing of a graph is different from the graph itself, right? There is no correct way to draw a graph, right? So these are two different drawings. Of the Peterson graph, which is a very famous graph because it has really amazing properties. Maybe we will see some of them or discuss some of them during the course. Okay. But I won't be calling drawings as drawings of the graph. I will just say that this is the Peterson graph. Okay. And H1 and H3, this graph here is called the pentagonal prism. And it is not isomorphic to the Peterson graph. Okay. Good. All right. So hopefully so far everything is clear. Are there any questions until this point regarding what graphs are and what an isomorphism between two graphs is? And just to be complete, two graphs are isomorphic if there exists an isomorphism between them as defined above. Okay. All right. So now let's go through quickly all graphs on four vertices. Okay. All non-isomorphic graphs on four vertices. Since I already know the number, I will already put some number of four vertices here. Okay, we are going to need at least 5, but we are going to need more than that. So either you have 0 edges, in which case you get this graph G1. If you have one edge, you will get this graph. Maybe I should call this G0. Doesn't matter. Okay, I'll call this G1 for now. Okay, if you have two edges, then the situation becomes a bit more interesting, right? Because either the two edges are incident at a common vertex, or they are not incident with a common vertex. Okay. So this is G2, and well, we're going to call this G3. It doesn't matter. Okay. So far we have all the graphs with up to two edges. Now, what about the case where we have three edges? Can someone tell me how many possibilities are there if I have three edges between four vertices?
3C2 into 2.
3C2 into 2. Let's see. But I want only the non-isomorphic graphs. So your claim is 3 choose 2 into 2. How much is that?
6.
That is 6. Okay. So let's see.
Writing.
So that is definitely an upper bound. Okay, I won't go into the calculation of that. That looks like an upper bound to me, but it's going to be actually lesser than that. Let's start going through the possibilities, right? So we have 3 edges. Can someone tell me what are the possibilities? I want non-isomorphic graphs. I'm not going to label the vertices for the reason that I only care about non-isomorphic graphs.
Sir, they can be K13 or path.
K13, okay, fine. So I'll define this for others later. But what you mean is they have a common vertex. So all the 3 edges are incident at a common vertex.
Yeah.
You are saying that the other possibility is that there is a path.
Yeah. Just one
So it's like
simple path.
this.
Yeah.
Right? And are there any other possibilities? I think someone wrote on the chat box C3. The 3 edges could also be like this. Yeah?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you can convince yourself now or after the lecture that these are the only 3 possibilities. So it's not actually 6, it is just 3 possibilities. Okay. Are you convinced, Biplab?
Yes, sir.
Right. Okay, good. So yeah, this you can do small amount of case analysis and convince yourself that no matter how you put the edges, as far as non-isomorphic graphs are concerned, there are exactly 3 on 4 vertices and 3 edges. So now about 4 vertices and 4 edges. Can someone tell me what are the possibilities? 4 vertices and 4 edges.
One C4. One procedure is C4.
Okay, C4 is a cycle on 4 vertices. Okay, so I'll put down the names. This is K13, and we'll discuss the reason for the notation later. This is P4 or 3, depends on how you define it. Okay, I'll call it P4 for now, and I'll call this C4. Okay, so there is C4. What about the other possibilities?
C3 with another edge.
C3 with another edge. And I believe these are all the possibilities. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now we are going to go to G9, which is all graphs with 5 edges. But before we do that, I want to first jump the gun and go to 6 edges. Does everybody agree that 6 is the maximum number of possible edges? Right? We have 4 vertices, it's 4 choose 2. Right? And this is clearly just one graph, which is called K4. Okay? Now, let's think about one lesser edge. Well, if you have one less edge, it's just removing one edge from K4. Right? And K4 is very symmetric. So removing one edge, no matter what edge you choose, is going to give you exactly one graph. Right? And that gives you this graph. K4 minus one edge. Okay? So these are all the graphs on 4 vertices, non-isomorphic graphs. I won't keep saying non-isomorphic, right? When I say graphs, I'm generally talking about them to be non-isomorphic. I really don't care about 2 graphs that are isomorphic, right? All right. So these are all the graphs, all the non-isomorphic graphs on 4 vertices. Okay. Good. At this point, I want to define a graph more generally. So until now, what we have been talking about are simple graphs. Okay, everything we have been discussing so far is actually they are called simple graphs. In general, in any graph theory text, you will see that they deal with more general graphs, and we may also in this course deal with more general graphs from time to time. Okay, so until now, everything was simple graphs. In a graph, we may also allow, I have an example here on me. So what we will also allow in certain modules of this course is the possibility of having 2 different edges joining the same vertices. and also the possibility of one edge joining the same vertex with itself. Okay, and let's see. So we will call such edges E1 and E2 as loops, and two edges that join the same pair of vertices, we will call them parallel edges. Okay, so in general we are going to allow loops and parallel edges. In certain modules of graph theory, in certain topics of graph theory, they don't really matter, and then we will only deal with simple graphs. Sometimes parallel edges matter but loops don't matter, and these are going to be called loopless graphs. Okay, so there are different terms for it. Loopless graphs. So we are allowing parallel edges but we don't allow loops, and these are also called as multi-graphs. Yeah, okay. So in general, if you want to define a graph, you now have to be slightly more careful, and it becomes a little bit annoying, but I will just go through this formal definition for the sake of it. Okay, so if you want to allow these kinds of possibilities, then a graph G is an ordered pair how good is the video and audio quality? Can someone comment on that? Okay, clear, thanks. Together with an incidence function, right? So now what I need to tell you is I need to distinguish between, for example, E3 and E4, right? So I'm going to give them labels E3 and E4, and for each edge I'm going to tell you which vertices it is adjacent with. Okay, okay, so I've labeled all the vertices and I've labeled some of the edges here. Let's call this E5. I won't label all of them, doesn't matter. Together with an incidence function, is this called psi? I think it is called psi, doesn't matter. Some Greek symbol. So each edge will be associated with an unordered pair of vertices. So for each edge, I will tell you, for example, psi of E1 is going to be V1, V1. And generally, I will just write it as V1, V1 without the brackets. Psi of E3 is V3, V4. Psi of E4 is also V3, V4. Psi of E5 is V1, V2. Right? So it basically tells you which two vertices are being joined by that edge, and the two vertices could be the same vertices. So it's an unordered pair of not necessarily distinct vertices in order to allow loops.
Sir, parallel edges have the same name. The both parallel edges.
No, I gave them different names, E3 and E4, but their ends are the same. Right? So the labels I gave to the edges are different, E3 and E4. They are parallel edges. They are parallel with each other, if you like. But their ends are the same. So psi of E3 is the same as psi of E4. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So for example, you could have three parallel edges between two vertices, and then all of them would be parallel. Okay. Okay, good. All right. So then this is the complete definition of a graph for this course. Okay. We will hardly be using this definition except for the sake of completeness. Generally, when we are dealing with proofs, we will not be having any function psi. We will be using words, and many times we will just be dealing with simple graphs. So parallel edges and loops will not even matter. Okay? But if you want to be really, really rigorous, then this is the definition. Okay? Good. So let's see. Are there any questions at this point? Okay, since we are following Bondi and Murthy, I'm also going to define, so we have loops and we have parallel edges, but we also have these, okay, actually, sorry. So yeah, just to be clear, because you'll be referring to the book, so I want to make sure that I'm covering all the terminology. So an edge which is not a link, which is not a loop, is also called a link in Bondi Murthy. I generally will not be using this term, but since we have a textbook, I just want to make sure that you know all the terms that you may need in order to read the text. Okay, so a link is an edge that is not a loop. Edge that is not a loop. Okay, so parallel edges also are links in this drawing. These parallel edges are also links. Okay, but the loops are not considered to be links. Does that make sense? Okay. Few more terms that we will need for the course. Until now, we were talking about simple graphs. For some time ago, we were talking about simple graphs on 3 vertices and all possible number of edges, right? So the number of vertices of a graph is called the order of the graph, and the number of edges is called the size. Okay, so order of a graph G is basically the cardinality of the vertex set, and we may also use sometimes little v of G for this, and generally it is denoted by n. Okay, so these are all basically the same things. And size of a graph is the number of edges, also often denoted as little e of G, and generally denoted by m. Okay, so just to give you an example, this graph here G9 has order 4 and size 5. Okay.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
What is the importance of E3 and E4 in an unordered pair graph? Are not they the same, that E3 and E4? I know that for ordered pair of vertices,
Right.
it is different.
Right.
But
so I guess your question is, why should we consider parallel edges at all? Is that right?
yeah,
Right.
I mean, for ordered pair of vertices, it makes sense because B3 and B4 is different from B4 to B3. But for unordered pair of vertices,
I see. So you're talking about directed graphs, right? So in directed graphs, it would make sense. Of course, in this course, we won't be talking about directed graphs, but since you already know, right? So you're saying that in a directed graph, it would make sense because the pairs are ordered. But why should we consider parallel edges in undirected graphs, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's see. How do I answer this one? Let's see. Okay. So so a lot of times what dictates the right definition is the application you have in mind, right? When the application could also be very theoretical, right? So, and another thing is that sometimes in order to prove statements about simple graphs, you actually need to resort to multigraphs. This is actually a very interesting phenomenon. I don't know if we will see, I think we will see one example of this at least. So when we come to connectivity, we will be talking about 3 connected graphs. And in that you will see why we sometimes, in order to prove statements about simple graphs, we may need to deal with multigraphs. Okay, let me give you one example. So I'm going to jump the gun here slightly. Have you seen the operation of contraction of an edge in a graph?
No, sir.
Okay, fine, no problem. So let me give you a quick example, and I'm really jumping the gun here to answer this question, but we won't take too long about that. So let's take this graph here. It's called a wheel. the notation is W5. 5 is the length of the cycle, and there is one vertex in the center. Okay, but we will go through these definitions later. So here, there is this operation of contracting an edge. What that means is, if you have an edge E, what you would do is you would identify the two ends of the edge into a single vertex. Okay, and you would make that vertex adjacent to all the vertices that the previous edge was adjacent to. Okay, so this is called contracting an edge, and we will see uses of it later in the course. But you see, when you contract an edge, like let me give you an example here. Supposing I want to contract this edge here. Okay, what will happen? I will identify these two vertices, V1 and V2, into a single vertex, and the rest of the graph will remain as it is. So let me first draw the rest of the graph. Okay, do you agree that the rest of the graph looks like this? These four
Yes.
vertices. Yeah. And now I'm going to put this new vertex that is obtained by contracting this edge E, and I'm going to make it adjacent to these two and these two. So that means it is adjacent to this, it is adjacent to this vertex twice, and now it looks like this. Okay, so you had a simple graph, but when you contracted the edge, you get two parallel edges. And well, you could say, well, why don't we just throw away one of the edges? Yeah.
Sir, voice makes some hazy, sir. Sir, please you explain that, sir. I'm unable to understand that things.
Okay.
That
Okay. So basically, I'm jumping the gun here slightly and explaining this operation of contracting an edge to show that how you can get a multigraph from a simple graph, right? Okay. And so I want to show you, so what is a contraction of an edge? You basically look at the two vertices and you identify it into a single vertex, and you keep the rest of the graph as it is. Does the operation make sense on the right side? Can you hear me, Biplab?
Yes, sir. I think you just squeeze the edge E into a single.
Right. I'm squeezing the edge E into a single
E-
vertex.
a
Let
single
me make
vertex.
this drawing again so that it's not confusing. So I'm going to make the drawing again. Right. So the graph I was looking at was this graph. Okay. And I contracted the edge E into a single vertex. And the new vertex is called, let's say, W. Okay. So this original graph was V1, V2, V3, V4, V5 with a center vertex called Z. And my new graph, after contracting the edge E, looks like this. Let me just label the vertices so that you can verify for yourself. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So contract E and you will get this graph. Okay. So the point I'm trying to illustrate here is that you're contracting an edge in a simple graph and you could create multiple edges, right? And in order to prove statements, you will have to deal with the fact that the original graph had two edges joining. The original graph had both of these edges. Let's call these F1 and F2, right? So in order to argue things about the original graph, you will have to look at the previous graph and then make some conclusions about the original graph. So in this kind of situation, it helps to keep the original edges as they were. Okay. So this is just one example where you have a graph operation and the operation creates a multigraph despite the fact that the original graph was a simple graph, right? And this is one way to see why in order to prove statements in graph theory, even if they are for simple graphs, sometimes you need multiple edges. Okay. Does that make some sense?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And of course, sometimes you have applications, specific applications in mind where multiple edges actually change things. Okay,
Sir,
we will see some such possibilities later.
Sir, is there any converse process of I think contraction?
Yes, there is. I'll let you think about it, and we will discuss it when we come to contraction later in the course.
Okay, sir.
Okay? So think about it for yourself. What is the converse of contraction? Okay?
Okay, sir.
That's a good point. Thank you. All right. So, okay. So that's what a graph is going to be in this course, right? We are going to have multiple edges and loops. But as I said before, for many parts of this course, we will not care about multiple edges and loops. And I will generally make it clear when that is the case. Okay? Okay, good. We also discussed order and size of a graph. So order is the number of vertices and size is the number of edges, right? We just discussed that here. Okay, good. Another thing I want to mention is the neighbors of a vertex, right? And for this, right, so if a vertex, let's see, supposing you look at, it is exactly what you think the name suggests. So most things in graph theory, the definitions are basically what you think the name suggests. So in this graph here, G3, the neighbors of V1 are V2 and V3. Right? So it is exactly the vertices to which the vertex is joined. Shouldn't have written at the end. Right. So the neighbors of a vertex are the vertices to which it is joined by an edge. Okay? Except itself. So we will not consider the vertex to be a neighbor of itself. Okay, give me a second. There is some problem in my computer. Okay. All right. Okay. So I was hoping to show you one proof today. Let's see if I can actually do it. I don't think it's possible. Okay. Okay, I want to just define two more things based on the order and the size of the graph. Actually, just the order. So a non-trivial graph is any graph that has at least two vertices. Okay? Is a graph with at least two vertices. And it often becomes very easy to state things without saying that the graph is at least two vertices. Okay? And otherwise, we will call it a trivial graph. So trivial graph is very useless. Okay? And of course, there is another thing called the null graph, which is basically nothing, right? So it's the graph with no vertices and no edges. Okay? Null graph is 0 vertices and 0 edges. Okay? I don't know when we will need this, but I'll just state it for the sake of completeness. Okay, good. So now that we have gone through all these basics, I want to now talk about families of graphs that are going to play an important role in the course. Okay? Can everybody see this? Okay. So let's see. I'm going to list down some families of graphs and then ask which ones are not known to some of you. And I will only define those to save time here. Okay. So complete graphs. And we will restrict ourselves to simple graphs for this discussion. Is everybody familiar with complete graphs? If you are not, please mention it. Right? So the notation is K for complete, because I think it comes from German or something. So this is K4, a graph with 4 vertices and all possible edges. Simple graph, right? Okay, is everybody familiar with bipartite graphs? If you are
Yes, sir.
not, please turn on your mic and tell me about it. Okay. Then we have got complete bipartite graphs, right? So you put some number of vertices on the left side, you put some number of vertices on the right side, and you join each vertex on the left to each vertex on the right. Okay, so this is K23, or if you like K32, doesn't matter. Okay. Okay, good. So far everybody is familiar with these terms. All right. Is everybody familiar with paths and cycles? Okay. So a path looks like a path and a cycle looks like a cycle. Right. And I'm going to use, let me be consistent here. For a path, are we putting the number of vertices or the number of edges? Does it even matter? Okay. Okay, I don't know. I'm going to put the number of edges. This is P3 and this is C5. Okay. And the length of a path or the length of a cycle is the number of edges in it. Length of a path or the length of a cycle is the number of edges. Okay. Of course, in a cycle, number of edges and number of vertices is the same. In a path, you have one more vertex than the number of edges. Okay. So these are some special families of graphs that you all seem to be familiar with. If you are not, just interrupt me and tell me and I will define it for you. Okay. Then we have one more family, regular graphs. Is everybody familiar with regular graphs? Okay, so I will still define regular graphs because I want to define the degree of a vertex. Degree of a vertex. Can anybody tell me what degree of a vertex is?
A number of incident edges on the vertex.
Exactly. And this is a perfect definition for simple graphs. For multigraphs, we are going to count the loops twice. Okay, so the vertex of the degree of this vertex here is 1, 2, 3, and the loop is going to be counted twice, 5. And here it's 3. Okay, so it is the number of edges incident with a vertex counting loops twice. Can anyone tell me a good reason why loops are counted twice? Can you use some fact from a basic graph theory course and explain to me why it makes sense to count loops twice?
Because the loops is the edges, it has 2 endpoints, but here is the endpoint same. So
Right.
that's why it twice, and you know that the degree is twice the number of edges like that.
Exactly, exactly. So someone, yeah, it's the handshaking lemma.
Yeah,
So when you sum up the degrees of the vertex of the graph, you get twice the number of edges, right? So this is a, yeah.
So if we don't count it as twice, then this lemma will not be true.
Exactly, exactly. So one reason for this is for the handshaking lemma to make sense. And if someone has not seen the handshaking lemma, please interrupt me. I will tell you what it is anyways. The sum of the degrees of degrees of the vertices of a graph. So this is the notation for degree of a vertex. I should probably write in the previous box. Degree of a vertex V is D of V. Okay. So when you sum up the degrees, you want to get twice the number of edges of the graph, right? And so it makes sense to count loops twice, otherwise the lemma will not be true, right? So sometimes you define things based on what nice facts would be true because of that definition. Okay, good. And that brings us to the definition of a regular graph. It is a graph in which all vertices have the same degree. And if this degree is k, if it is k, then we call the graph a k regular graph, right? So let's see here. C5 is a 2 regular graph. The Peterson graph and the pentagonal prism that we saw earlier, they are 3 regular graphs. Okay. And 3 regular graphs play a very important role in graph theory, which is why we will also call them cubic graphs. And we will see in this course why they are really important and really cool. Okay. Also known as cubic graphs. Okay. Good. Quick question. Are complete bipartite graphs regular graphs or are they not?
They may or may not be.
Right. When
So
are
if the
they
num-
regular?
If the number of vertices are equal in the both
Exactly.
sides.
Exactly. Thank you, Ravi. Thank you, Biplab. So complete bipartite graph is regular if and only if the number of vertices on the left side is equal to the number of vertices on the right side. Right? Good. All right. So we have gone through several definitions. Tomorrow we will be proving a statement for sure. I will already write it down so that you can start thinking about it. Theorem 4.7 in Bondi-Murthy. I will generally use the numbers from Bondi-Murthy so that you know where to look up things. We will prove tomorrow a graph is bipartite if and only if it does not contain an odd cycle as a subgraph. Right? And I have not defined subgraph, but a subgraph is what you think it is, to be honest. Okay, so this is a statement we will be proving tomorrow, and you can already try to prove it yourself. If you have already seen it in a previous course, which is very likely, then you can try to reproduce the same proof or try to prove it again on your own. We will define what a subgraph is tomorrow. We will talk more about, we'll talk a bit more about cycles. We will also talk about trees and spanning trees and everything. And in particular, we will prove this theorem. Okay, so I'll just write down some things we are going to discuss tomorrow. We will talk about acyclic subgraphs. We will talk about forests and trees. Someone's mic is on, please turn it off. We will talk about connected graphs. We will talk about spanning trees. Biplav, your mic is on. Could you please turn it off? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, so we will start from here tomorrow and we will prove this theorem. Okay. And I will be here for another 7-8 minutes in case there are any questions or any discussions.
Sir, you will post this PDF na, in the work.
Yes, I will be posting this PDF on Piazza, and I will also be making the recording available on YouTube later today. I will probably first go and have lunch, but after that I'll do all of this.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, sir.
Any other questions or concerns? Biplab, when you are not speaking, could you please turn off the mic? There is some disturbance otherwise. Thanks. Any other questions, concerns, comments?
Sir, I'm not sure if this was discussed yesterday. I heard that you may conduct an endsem if the class strength increases.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but can I just know if it will be online or offline by any chance?
Well, my understanding is that the semester is online. So if the semester is going to be completely online, then the exam will also be online. It will be a take-home exam.
Yeah, it'll be a take-home exam, right?
Yes, yes, it will be a
Okay.
take-home exam with 48 to 72 hours to complete it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Sir, if by chance we go back to the institute, then also can you keep it as a take-home exam, because some of the dates are interfering with our internships. I mean,
I see. I see. I can't promise that right now. I will try. But yeah, at this point, I even if you all go back to the institute, there is some chance that I may still be here. So it could still very well be a take-home exam. But I wouldn't promise anything regarding that right now.
okay, sir. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Any other questions or concerns? There is a question, is there any way to determine if two graphs are non-isomorphic? That is not an easy discussion. So is it Sayantan who asked the question?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are you familiar with complexity classes NP and co-NP?
Not exactly, sir. I have heard the terms, but I am not
Okay.
exactly
Okay.
familiar
It's
with.
okay. It doesn't matter. I'll tell you briefly what they are. So let me ask you this. Can you convince someone that two graphs are isomorphic?
Sir, I have to define a map, no, a bijective map between two graphs to
Exactly.
determine if they are
Exactly.
isomorphic.
But the point is, if you know this bijection, you can show it to someone and convince them that the two graphs are isomorphic. You agree with me?
Yes, sir.
Right. So if you already know the bijection, you can show it to someone, and that will mean that the person can verify easily that this is indeed an isomorphism.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
If I know the map, then I can. Yes, sir.
Right. So to make this more precise, in theoretical computer science, you have this thing called decision problem. Given two graphs, G1 and G2, decide whether G1 and G2 are isomorphic. So this decision problem is in the complexity class NP, because you can easily convince someone that two graphs are isomorphic. However, how do you convince someone that the two graphs are not isomorphic?
Yes,
Right?
sir.
This is
Then
exactly the question you asked.
yes, sir. Then I have to check all the possibilities.
Exactly.
If,
Exactly. This problem is not even known to be in co-NP. So to be in co-NP, it means that you can convince someone that the two graphs are not isomorphic. That if that is possible, then the problem would be in co-NP. I'm not making this super rigorous. You have to put polynomial time, blah, 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 blah. Of course, you can check all the possibilities. So in exponential time, one can be convinced that the two graphs are not isomorphic. But if you want to do it efficiently, then it's not possible, or it's not known to be possible, to be precise. So graph isomorphism is in NP, but it is not in co-NP.
okay, sir.
Yeah. And of course, the algorithmic question is even harder, or is also very difficult, because if you had an algorithm which was efficient, then you would also be able to convince someone about non-isomorphic graphs, right? So there is no known polynomial time algorithm. Someone mentioned in the chat box, it is a problem which is neither NP nor is NP complete. Right? Is that someone? Right. Yeah, it is not known to be NP complete, and it is also not polynomial time solvable. Okay. Thanks. Any other questions? No? Okay, so if
Okay,
there are no
so
further questions, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, so I had a question that
Yes.
like I was just wondering that in like structural graph theory, do we only wonder about bipartite graphs, or we also like deal with n-partite graphs, like in general where n is greater than or equal to 3?
I see, I see, I see. Well, we will deal with all graphs, which includes n n-partite graphs. um, the problem is, well, it's not a problem. The very interesting phenomenon is that bipartite graphs really play a very special role in all of graph theory. Whether it is structural graph theory or algebraic graph theory, you will see topics in graph theory where bipartite graphs are really different from all of the other non-bipartite graphs. This is the reason bipartite graphs there is so much emphasis on bipartite graphs. There are topics in graph theory where you study k-partite graphs in particular. There is a theorem called Turan's theorem that you can look up, which is where you will see k-partite graphs playing a special role. Okay, but I don't think three-partite graphs or four-partite graphs have any kind of special role comparable to bipartite graphs. That is the reason there is so much emphasis on bipartite graphs.
Okay, I see. Thanks.
Right? Thanks. Any other questions? I should mention that any graph is k-partite for some k, right? Is that true? Is that a true statement? Yeah, that is a true statement. Make each vertex a part, and now every simple graph is k-partite for some k. You make every vertex a part, and now every edge joins two vertices between different parts, right? So we are in that sense dealing with k-partite graphs, just that they don't play a special role for a fixed k. Any other questions, comments? Okay, if not, please feel free to leave the meeting and I will stop the recording at this point.